Photos, videos, RAWs, JPEGs, MP4s. Oh my. With 2 card slots and 4 or more different recordings formats split between photos and videos, the biggest question in all of this might be, which card does everything go to and how do we actually control that? What's up everybody, I'm Jason and welcome back to some more tips and tricks for the Canon EOS R5. Now today we are digging into how the R5 saves files to the cards that you have in the camera. And we're going to look at how to set what goes to which cards and the different ways the camera can distribute your files to those cards. Now, as usual, the usual disclaimer applies here. The features covered in this video are general software functions found in Canon's EOS Photo OS. And in this case, you will find the same or very similar functionality on all of their other dual-card mirrorless cameras like the R3, R6 Mark II, R7, and the R5C in photo mode. As well as, in fact, Canon's newer dual-card slot DSLRs like the 5D Mark IV and the 1DXs. Now that said, I've used the R5 for the testing and demonstrations that you see in this video. As such, if you are using a different model, where things are in the menus and the exact way that everything behaves or the exact limitations that your camera has may vary from what I'm showing here. So let's start by talking about the cards on the R5C. The R5 has 2 dissimilar memory cards. One is a CFExpress Type B card and the other is an SDXC or Secure Digital Extended Capacity card that supports up to UHS-2 transfer speeds. Canon identifies these cards in the menus and the manuals with a number and an icon. The CFExpress card is card number 1, and that of course makes the SD card card number 2. Now, Canon's choice to use dissimilar cards has some pros and cons, and in some cases this can impact the formats that you can record to or use and the overall performance that you may see out of your camera. So on one hand, SD cards are considerably cheaper than CFExpress cards, and they're often more readily available in non-specialty stores, and in general are going to be more than fast enough for the vast majority of users out there in most cases. Now, on the other hand, because of their limited speeds, at least compared to CFExpress cards, the camera will not record some video formats to an SD card. These include 8K RAW, 8K All-I, 4K at 100 or 120 frames per second, 4K All-I in HEVC mode with 4K or 2.2 chroma subsampling, and 4K All-I in AVC mode at 50 or 60 frames per second. Now, also in photo mode, bursts may be shorter, and it will take longer for the buffer to clear when using the SD card compared to the CFExpress card. Now, of course, the big reason for having 2 cards is redundancy. As with any good professional level camera, the R5's dual slots let you save your images in some video formats and, of course, stills to both cards simultaneously, providing you with real-time protection against card failures at the moment or just thereafter of capture, instead of you having to worry about backing things up at some point down the line. Now, before I get to the settings, the camera shows one last thing. The camera shows the active and available cards in the detailed shooting information overlay on the on-screen display. Now, if you're not familiar with working with the on-screen display configurations and navigating it and customizing it, I have done a video on that, which I will link in the usual places. In photo mode, you will find the available cards are displayed here on the left side of the OSD right next to the image format icons. The white arrow points to the selected card. Now, if both cards are being used like they would be in dual card recording modes, then both will have a white arrow next to them. In movie mode, the currently selected card is found at the top of the right side over here. In this case, only the active card is shown. If you are doing multiple card recording modes, there is no indication that that second card is being used in the OSD. Now, with that said, let's start looking at how the cards are selected and used. All of the settings for this are found in the Record Function plus Card/Folder selection menu at the top of the Setup 1 menu page. However, there are 2 other ways to control the card being used through the quick control menus, and I will talk about that later in this video. So the first setting in the record function plus card folder selection menu is the photo/movie separate setting. Now, by default, this should be set to disabled, and I honestly recommend leaving it that way unless you are really on your toes with how you use your camera and what you're doing. When this is enabled, movie files will only be saved to the CFExpress card, and photos will only be saved to the SD card. Additionally, you cannot override this setup or change any of the routing when that is configured. So you might be wondering what happens if you forget to put an SD card in your camera and you go out to shoot some stills. And the simple answer to that is the camera won't shoot them. If the required card for the format you're trying to work in is missing, the camera will treat it as though there is no card in the camera at all. It will display a warning that there is no card in the camera on the LCD and EVF, and by default, the shutter will not release. However, if you have enabled release shutter without card found on the Shoot 6 menu page, then the camera will ignore the no card warning and release the shutter anyway. And this is broadly where I have my problem with this setting. To start with, in the heat of trying to get a shot, you can easily miss the no card warning. I've missed bigger things, even though it is right in the middle of the on-screen display. Moreover, if your camera is set up to shoot without a card, as it might be if you do a lot of tethered capture work, it sounds like the camera took a picture when you hit the shutter release. It will even display the review image, but nothing will actually be saved. Now, compounding matters, if you see the no card warning and then you open the card door and see a card in the card slot, like your CFExpress card, it's not hard again in the heat of the moment to not realize that this is the setting that's causing the warning and it's the other card that's missing, and think that there's a bigger problem with either your camera or perhaps that your card has died. The reality, at least in my experience, is that in the field, in the heat of the moment, and amidst the adrenaline of thinking that your camera is broken or that your card has died and your pictures are all lost, things like this aren't that easy to diagnose and recognize. And even then, if you are on top of all of that, by the time you realize what's going on, it's probably already too late for whatever it was that you were trying to shoot. Now, when the photo movie separate setting is disabled, then the rest of the settings in the submenu will be enabled, and you will have full control over where things get saved on your camera. On top of this, the camera actually behaves a bit more sanely, saving your files to whatever card is actually in the camera. So with the first setting disabled, let's look at the rest of the settings in this menu. However, we're going to jump out of order a little bit here, as I think it makes a little more sense to talk about card selection before we talk about the recording options. So jumping down to the third and fourth settings, we find photo record / play and movie record / play settings. Though depending on what record option is chosen, if you are recording dual cards simultaneously, these may just read play instead of record and play. Now, these two settings control which card the camera will record photos or videos to respectively, and then play them back from in movie review mode or in review mode. As long as you have both cards in your cameras, you can select either card here. If only one card is in the camera, then only that card will be available in this menu. And in fact, don't think of these settings as defaults or preferences or the way you want things to be routed, but think of these rather as the card the camera will actually use right now for saving that function. If you remove the selected card, the camera will automatically change to using the other card. If you turn the camera off and only install one card, the camera will use that card, whichever card it is. So for example, if I set my photos to be recorded to card 1, and then I remove the CFExpress card and put the SD card back, or put an SD card in the camera, they will automatically go to card 2 instead. If I reinsert the CFExpress card without removing the SD card, the camera will not automatically change back, even though that's where I had it set previously. Now that said, you can tell the camera to prefer to use the CFExpress card if it's available. In the card selection screen, you will find a checkbox that says Priority Card 1 in the bottom left corner. When this is checked, the camera will automatically switch to the CFExpress card if that card is in the camera. If the card is removed, then the camera will use the SD card slot instead, but when the CFExpress card is reinserted, it switches back to it again automatically. Unfortunately, there is no way to prioritize the SD card. Now, with that covered, let's go back to the two recording options that we skipped. These are photo record options and movie record options. Now, each of these settings has 4 possible modes to choose from, of which 3 do the same thing between the 2 different modes. The 4 photo record options are standard, auto switch cards, record separately, and record to multiple. For the movie record options, instead of having record separate, the setting will be card 1 RAW, card 2 MP4 instead. The first and default option for these settings is standard. This records everything to the selected card for the respective photo or movie mode. Now, as I said, this is the default from the factory and where most people will leave their camera set to. And for the most part, there is no reason to really change this setting in general, although, of course, if you want the more specific functions, you're going to change it. Now, where this setting differs from the next option, auto switch cards, is how the camera handles full cards. In standard, when a card becomes full, the camera displays the full card warning and stops shooting more images. At that point, if you want to continue shooting, you would need to replace the card with an empty one or manually switch over to using the other card slot. Or you could use the second setting in this menu, Auto Switch Cards. This operates almost exactly the same way as standard, except when the card becomes full, the camera will automatically switch to the other card if it has space available. So you can think of this as, or actually use it like, an automatic card extender or backup card more space mode, at least to an extent. So, for example, if you have 228 gigabyte cards in your camera, but one in each slot, your camera would have a total of 256 gigabytes of storage. In photo mode, if you're shooting in the heat of the moment and you happen to fill up the card that you were using, the camera will then seamlessly switch to using the second card, and you keep shooting like nothing ever happened. Now, of course, you have to at some point realize and check that the card is what you're using and all of that stuff. But in the heat of that moment, you get to keep making those images. However, in movie modes, things aren't quite as seamless. If the current card becomes full while you are recording, the camera will stop recording and switch cards. However, you will need to manually restart the recording after that. In other words, the camera will not automatically split the files between the 2 cards and keep recording. Now that said, in movie mode, Auto Switch Card has one additional feature that's quite nice. Remember earlier when I said some formats like RAW movies can't be recorded to the SD card? Well, if the camera is set to Auto Switch Card and you choose one of those formats while you have the SD card selected, instead of getting an error, the camera will simply switch to the CFExpress card and start recording. Now that brings me to the first of the dual card recording options, and that is record separately. Now this is only available in photo mode and will separate your RAW and JPEG or HEIF, if you are using those, files to different cards. However, what might be confusing here is how you go about configuring which format goes to which card. This is actually done in the image quality settings found at the top of the Shoot One menu, or by using the quick control menu and controlling the image quality settings there. Now that said, one thing to be aware of is that you cannot use this to save RAWs to one card and CRAWs to the other. That said, you can record different size JPEG qualities, or different size JPEGs and qualities to each of the 2 cards if you are working in JPEG. The movie mode equivalent of record separately is card 1 RAW, card 2 MP4, and this does pretty much what it says on the tin and a little bit more. RAW clips are recorded to the CFExpress card, and MP4 proxy versions of those are recorded to the SD card. If you are looking for how to record RAW and an in-camera proxy MP4 file, this is actually the setting you want. The bit more part here is that this also changes the camera's movie record quality to RAW plus MP4 and the menu settings available along with it. Now be aware, your options for recording quality are quite limited here. You can choose between either RAW and RAW Lite for the RAW file and 4K IPB or IPB Lite for the MP4 file. Those are your only options in terms of quality. Frame rates can be either 23.97, 24, 25, or 30 frames per second, depending on the available, or depending on whether the camera is set to NTSC or PAL. No other video record settings will be available. Also be aware that when this setting is selected, the movie record size menu changes to show only these dual format options and not the regular record format setup. Now, the final option here is the record to multiple setting, and this is your live in-camera redundancy option. When this is selected, the camera will save your files to both cards simultaneously with the same name. Now that said, this does come with some caveats. To start with, since both cards are being used, the effective write speeds and buffer clearing times will be as slow as the slowest card, the SD card. And since this is available in movie mode as well, it does mean that your movie recording options will also be limited to what can be recorded to the SD card, at least if you want the redundancy. Now that said, you do not need to use the same size cards when you use this. If the cards are of different sizes, the camera will use the smallest card for its remaining frame estimates and recording time estimates, and for when it considers the card full. So, for example, if you have a 64 gig card and a 256 gig card in your camera, you will see that the frame count that you see for the estimated frames and recording time remaining is that of the 64 gig card. And when that 64 gig card becomes full, the camera will tell you that there is no more space available. That said, when your small card becomes full, you do not have to swap out both cards at the same time. You can simply swap the full card, the small one, for an empty card and continue on with the file mirroring, and the camera will still shoot mirrored files to both your large and small cards. Now, the final entry in the record function plus card folder selection menu is the folder selection creation entry. And I'm not going to get into this one in this video as this is already getting quite long and I've still got a lot more to go with the card selection. But suffice to say, you can use this menu to create new folders on your cards so that you can organize your images appropriately. So that is the record function plus card folder select menu, but that is not the only way you can change those settings. You can also change almost all or all of these settings through the quick control menus as well. Now, if you just want to change the target card that you're currently recording to, you can do this through the Live View Quick Control menu. In photo mode, open the Quick Control menu by pressing the Quick Control menu button, that's the Q with the box around it, and select the image quality icon on the middle of the left side here. The currently selected card is of course indicated by the arrow pointing towards it. To change this, press the Info button, either the virtual or physical one, and that arrow will switch to the other card. In movie mode, the process is similar but a little bit different. This time, the active card is a standalone setting over here on the right side. Simply select the card setting and use the main dial to change it, or tap the card that you want to use on the bottom of the screen. Now, another method to access the card selection and recording modes is through the fifth info screen. That's this one with all the camera settings on it. Now to get here, press the info button until you see the screen. If you cycle through all of your screens and you do not see this, then it's probably been disabled in the Shooting Info Display customizations, which are found on the Shoot 7 menu page. I've also done a video looking at these customizations, which I'll link in the description below so you can go and enable it if it's not enabled. In any event, on this screen, pressing the Quick Control menu button, either the physical or virtual one, and selecting the cards in photo mode, that will be this box with the two card icons here in the bottom row. In movie mode, it will be the single card icon in the bottom row here. This will bring up a simplified version of the record function card selection menu that we talked about previously. Now, the simplification here is that the settings you see only apply to the mode that you're currently in. In other words, if you're currently in movie mode, the settings you see only apply to your movie mode options and not photo mode. Now, since this menu only deals with the current movie or photo mode, you can select your recording options or current card here using either the touch screen or the indicated dials. The main dial controls the selected card, and the quick control dials, either the ones on the back or the one around your mode button if you have 3 dials on your camera, controls the recording mode settings. Now, since these are quick control menus, changes take effect as soon as they are made. Now, with that said, I am going to wrap this one up here. If you found this useful or at least interesting, let me know by hitting that like button. If this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you aren't already. Finally, if you'd like to support this video and future videos like it, please consider hitting that thanks button if you can, or buying yourself something you've always wanted from one of the affiliate links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.